I pray to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and two of those
You're
three
tap dancing
were
again.
polygamists.
You're tap dancing again. Yeah. Okay.
The same God that Jesus prayed to.
Yeah. I guess I'm about done.
So, did Joseph Smith practice polygamy? The answer is yes. He did. The evidence is clear. Let's start with Doctrine and Covenants 132. This was a revelation given to Joseph Smith for his wife Emma, who is struggling with accepting the practice of plural marriage. The bottom line is this. If Section 132 was written by Joseph Smith, this debate is over. Okay? It proves that Joseph practiced polygamy. So my opponent will ignore the evidence and simply assume that because the revelation was only made public in 1852, that it must not be from Joseph. Now, the church claims that the revelation was received on July 12th, 1843. Why would they do that? Well, because in Joseph's own journal, it's written down. It says on July 12th, 1843, received a revelation in the office in presence of Hiram and William Clayton. But what was that revelation about? Well, William Clayton went home that night and wrote down the following. William Clayton's July 12th, 1843 journal entry reads, "This A.M. wrote a revelation consisting of 10 pages on the order of the priesthood, showing the designs in Moses, Abraham, David, and Solomon having many wives and concubines." Okay, so we have two contemporaneous journal entries confirming it was received July 12th, 1843. But wait, there's more. You see, the next month in August, they held a high council meeting in Nauvoo. Can my opponent tell you what they discussed in that meeting? No, and he will avoid discussing this high council meeting because everyone who was in that meeting said that Section 132 was introduced at that meeting. But maybe these people were all part of Brigham Young's cabal of murderous polygamists plotting to take over the church. Sorry. Actually, no. William Marks, Austin Cowles, and Leonard Sobey were all in that meeting, and they were shocked when they heard Section 132 read. And all of them eventually left the church. So why would these three anti-polygamists say that Hiram read Section 132 in that meeting? You can't say they were part of Brigham's plot. These guys were anti-polygamists. We even have Franklin Richards' journal entry from that very day, August 12th, 1843, saying that the meeting discussed the reestablishment of the Old Testament practice of ancient Israel where a brother would take on more than one wife to raise up seed. Now, in 1886, an RLDS apostle, the RLDS church opposed polygamy. They didn't believe that Joseph had practiced it. And one of their apostles wanted to find out what happened. So he went to find Leonard Sobey, who had been in that meeting, to find out and ask him. And guess what? Leonard Sobey submitted a notarized statement, which read, on or about the 12th day of August, 1843, Hiram Smith read the revelation on celestial marriage. That revelation did not originate with Brigham Young, but was received by the prophet Joseph Smith and read in the high council by his authority. Okay? Why would he say that? The RLDS apostle resigned his apostleship after speaking with Sobey. If you want to stump a polygamy denier, just ask them what happened in the August 1843 High Council meeting in Nauvoo. All the historical evidence says that on August 12th, 1842, Section 132 was read to the High Council. And then some of that High Council leaked Section 132 to the Nauvoo Expositor. How do we know this? Well, because the Nauvoo Expositor quotes parts of 132 and hits on all of its major themes in detail. You can go through these in more time. I don't have time now to go through all of it. Now, obviously, the Nauvoo Expositor contains falsehood, but good liars mix truth and falsehoods. And it's obvious that section 132 had been leaked to them. The question for my opponent is, how did the quotes from section 132 end up in the May 1844 Nauvoo Expositor? Tonight you will watch my opponent run like crazy from this question, because it's proof that section 132 was not written after Joseph Smith's death. Remember this, if section 132 is read in that meeting, this debate is over, and Joseph practiced polygamy. And the historical record overwhelmingly indicates that 132 was read in that High Council meeting. But let's keep going. How about that letter from Oliver Cowdery talking about that nasty, filthy scrape with Fanny Alger? We all know that Joseph Smith and Oliver became more distant after that. What was that about? Also, why was Fanny kicked out of the Smith home? And why would Fanny's family members say that she was married to Joseph and that they had participated in that? We know that after that incident that Joseph and Oliver became more distant. Also, why did Fanny never deny the claims? If I asked my opponent here, if I claimed that he was married to this young woman over here, he would deny it. Fanny never did. Now, because this practice was being kept confidential, people were very leery to write about it, but they would write about it. For example, William Clayton, the prophet scribe, made the following cryptic journal entry on May 1st, 1843, which later he explained meant, at 10, I married Joseph to Lucy Walker at President Joseph's residence. But maybe he's lying. If that's the case, then why did Lucy Walker, without reading this journal, independently confirm that event? Or how about this, where he writes in his journal in coded language that Joseph Smith married and sealed him to his first plural wife, Margaret Moon. But then again, maybe he was lying. But then again, we have Margaret Moon independently confirming this event. Now, how about the favorite bad guy here, Brigham Young? Well, Brigham wrote in a Masonic coded language in his journal when he wanted to keep things confidential. On January 6, 1842, he wrote in his journal in a coded language that Joseph was wedded and sealed to Agnes Smith. But maybe this was just Brigham making stuff up. Nope. Agnes Smith, who could not read this coded language, confirmed Joseph was a polygamist and never denied that this event happened. But maybe she was protecting Brigham or was afraid of him. Again, nope. She actually left the church and moved to California and still never denied her testimony, even when our LDS missionaries went out there in 1876 trying to get her to change her story. How about Sidney Rigdon? Sidney Rigdon opposed Brigham Young, and he admitted in 1846 that he knew Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, and he tried to warn him, and he said it would lead to his ruin and the ruin of the church. You see, the problem for my opponent is that even the people who hated Brigham Young said Joseph practiced it. For instance, while Emma and the RLDS group denied Joseph's polygamy, the Strangites, William Smith, and those who followed Lyman Wright to Texas all held that Joseph introduced plural marriage. They weren't part of Brigham's plot. That's why no credentialed historians are on my opponent's side. But there's another thing to consider here, and that's the Scriptures. We are the only Christian sect that accounts for plural marriage in the Bible. The Book of Mormon teaches it correctly. In Jacob 2, it condemns polygamy and sets monogamy as the norm. But Jacob also states that if God feels it necessary, he will command plural marriage. Otherwise, we are to hearken to the norm of monogamy. Does my opponent realize the house of Israel was literally a polygamous household? That's right. Jacob had multiple wives. So did Abraham. So did Moses. So did a long list of people favored by God in the Scriptures. Nathan the prophet says that the Lord gave David his wives. You can look up the reference, 2 Samuel 12, 7 and 8. Now, not only are the Scriptures not on my opponent's side, But as I've shown, neither is the historical record. So what he's going to do tonight is claim that the historical records are totally unreliable because Brigham Young and his friends altered the history, which I'll rebut in my next round. I anticipated what he was going to say. That is why I've included all these witnesses who were clearly never on Brigham's side. That's why I've included irrefutable proof that Section 132 was leaked to the 1844 Nauvoo Expositor and quoted prior to Joseph Smith's death. That's why I've included scriptures that show God's direct involvement in giving wives to people like David. Now, he will likely show Joseph and others condemning unauthorized polygamy and John Bennett's spiritual wife system. But then he will act like it was a condemnation of celestial plural marriage. Don't forget that while Joseph was practicing celestial plural marriage in the 1840s, he was fighting against unauthorized polygamy and spiritual wifery. Lastly, as you listen to my opponent, just think how many people would have to have been involved and kept quiet their entire lives for this theory to be correct. Now, I don't mean conspiracy in a derogatory way. I mean it literally. Like the only way for his story to work is if an incredibly large group, like 70 plus people, in Joseph's inner circle were lying and intentionally working together for years on a plot to kill Joseph Smith and take over the church. I mean, he thinks John Taylor killed Joseph Smith. The same John Taylor who said Joseph Smith did more for the salvation of mankind than any other person except for Jesus. Now, one last thing to consider. If the keys of the kingdom were given to Joseph Smith, but were not passed on to Brigham Young, who holds them today? If my opponent is correct, he either must posit that someone else holds those keys of the kingdom and the sealing power, or he must admit that Joseph Smith failed and we have slipped back into an apostasy. But didn't Joseph say that the keys of the kingdom would not again be taken from the earth? That this was the final dispensation? You see, the big problem is that if my opponent is correct, then what he proves is that Joseph Smith was not a prophet. But luckily, my opponent is demonstrably wrong. The historical record is quite clear that Joseph Smith introduced plural marriage, and the keys are still on earth today to bind families together forever. Thank you. So, if Section 132, which discusses plural marriage, was written by Joseph Smith, would you agree that that he did practice plural marriage?
Yeah. In other words, his character of honesty. Okay. If it was shown, yeah, I would think that it's from him. Yeah.
Okay.
I would think that he was engaged in the practice he wrote about in the scriptures he published.
Is it fair to say that the church currently claims that 132 was received by the prophet on July 12th, 1843?
Yep, that's claim written right in the chapter
heading. Was
any
revelation received by Joseph Smith that day?
Yeah, from the record that we know from the Council of 50, there was something read that seems to be very inconsistent with the length of the revelation, and there was nothing published at that time saying there was plural marriage being discussed. I would think it would be salacious enough that if it is, as you claim, many wives and concubines in the here and now, it would have garnered more attention.
So you agree that a revelation was received. You agree that a revelation was read in the High Council.
Yeah.
You agree that that revelation did have to do with plural marriage.
Yeah, there's notes to that effect that I believe Joseph and Hiram have both spoken to and published their position on it.
Okay. So,
and just to clarify, they published their position that it has to do only in the past, not in the here and now. So I do believe them.
Okay, so why then on August 12th did Franklin D. Richards write this in his journal?
August 12th, what year?
That 1843, when this is the day of the High Council meeting, he said that Hiram read before the council that no prophet ever did transgress, but was directed by the impulse of the Holy Spirit. He also said that a man shall take his brother's wife and raise up seed unto him. Why would he write that?
I don't know. It seems very inconsistent with the dates that we know, because after that date, there was multiple occasions when Hiram Smith would excoriate anybody publishing the polygamy of any time. When I make a clip out of this later, I'm going to make sure that I include the dates, because after the date that you referenced with Richards, Hiram would say, anybody teaching this to you, even if it's an angel from God, all you have to do is look at the cloven hooves on his feet. In other words, after the date that you just mentioned, Hiram says it's from Satan. Why would Hiram make that claim if he's reading a revelation supposedly in this meeting that you're talking about?
Did anyone in that meeting deny that section 132 was read?
Nobody even knew what section 132 was. There was no number attached to it until decades later.
So why would Leonard Sobey say that that was the revelation that was read and he was in the meeting?
Now,
why should we trust you over Leonard Sobey?
Here's what we're all in agreement about.
All of the people that were in that meeting.
So whatever that revelation is, we know that there's no original. We know that the only person who claims, I wrote the one and only copy in the world is William Clayton. And after the date that you mentioned to where many wives and concubines is being talked about, Hiram continued to condemn polygamy in all forms. So your dates do not match up with the known historical record of Joseph and Hiram both continuing to condemn polygamy after the date you just mentioned.
Okay, so why were sections of 132 quoted in the Nauvoo Expositor?
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear to where there's lots of accusations that continue to happen to Joseph. As members of the church, we do tend to find him to be honest, especially when he would go to court and be exonerated on many things.
Do you disagree that the Nauvoo Expositor quoted 132?
Details that are found in the Nauvoo Expositor are clearly found in section 132. So when it's 8 years after Joseph's death, when Brigham Young says, we now have a new order of things, I've got a desk, and that revelation is hidden inside of there with no original, it's pretty easy to imagine that somebody determined to implement the new order of things inserts his own doctrine.
Okay. Why does the RLDS Church no longer deny his polygamy?
Probably for the same reason they denounced the Book of Mormon. They seem like just spiritually impotent retards. Why does their church historian say that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy? I mean, do you want a different answer than the one that I just gave you? Like, what you're saying, you're not showing any evidence that like, oh, wow, we've seen it. They simply say, I guess we believe it. These people are the ones that seem to be sticking up for Joseph.
I'll go along with it. Can you name a single credentialed historian who holds to your view?
The only historians that I really know are brain fart Don Bradley and Many Wives and Concubines Brian Hales. So I've made videos on both of them, and I would love to have a wrestling match with both of them simultaneously in the same night, and then you and I would go after that.
Sounds good. How much time I got, Brad?
Keep going.
3 minutes? Okay, cool.
But I don't know. I just don't know many historians.
I gotta ask the questions during this section.
But let me say this regarding Don Bradley and Brian C. Hales. Those are the ones that
I got the time here. I'm in control of the floor. Right. Why did more than 70 contemporaries of Joseph Smith go to their deathbed saying that Joseph Smith practiced plural marriage, including people who hated Brigham Young?
So I would love to see that list, because what usually happens when a list like that, when somebody says, there's just so many, and you just take a look at 30 years after his death, 40 years after his death, like what was just up on the screen a moment ago, it was 44 years after his death.
Why did Sidney Rigdon say that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy?
I don't know. In other words, I would take a look at the date and say, hey, Sidney, can you do what Jacob Hansen didn't do? Can you show me any evidence?
The historical record?
No, in other words, I take testimony seriously, but when it becomes the testimony of traitors decades after Joseph's death, I do find Joseph's published record.
Did you know
hold on, let me just finish my let me finish my thought. I do find Joseph Smith's.
Can you just pause the time? Is it customary that you guys have to talk over each other?
I know. Well, in other words, I want to finish.
The cross-examiner has the floor.
Yeah, and let me just flesh out this complete. Now you gave.
Go ahead.
You rolled me off. Can you hit your last question again?
I was saying, why did Sidney Rigdon say that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy in 1846?
Yeah, and I don't know a whole lot specifically about Sidney Rigdon, but I would ask him the same question. Sidney, can you do what Jacob Hansen didn't do here? Is there any record that you can show from Joseph? Because right now, if somebody were to say, President Nelson is practicing polygamy, he's got 30 wives and concubines, we would say, there's going to be evidence of this. In the historical record, there's no evidence of Joseph Smith trying to have his last goodbyes with his supposed 30-plus wives. There's no record of any sealings. Even my brother who worked at the church office building.
Why did Ebenezer Robinson write to Joseph Smith III saying that Hiram taught him plural marriage? He was not a Brighamite.
Will you remind me the year that he made that claim?
1888. Do you deny all claims that are made later?
44 years after his death. Do you consider that more credible than Joseph's published testimony at the time?
Joseph, what if, do you believe it's possible Joseph was keeping something confidential?
Yeah, in other words, I won't hold any mortal man to the standard of I think he's perfect. No, I believe everybody would have an incentive to hide things that they know that they're doing are wrong. I don't believe that's the case with Joseph Smith, and that's why you're relying upon 44 years after his death.
What would have happened if Joseph had come out publicly and said, we're all practicing polygamy?
Well, it sounds like Brigham Young thought he was pretty credible, so his polygamy was based upon Joseph's testimony. Seems like Brigham Young thought he was credible enough to borrow his credibility, so maybe he would have had it.
What would have been the consequence to the saints? Would they have been persecuted, driven out, and killed?
No, I doubt that, because Joseph Smith himself was very clear that he taught the stronger doctrines in public. When it comes to eternal marriage, he taught it
Did the
publicly.
Savior ever keep things confidential?
I don't know. In other words, if you're talking about the scriptural record that we have, it seems like that's pretty public because we can all read it for ourselves. We got the digital version on our phones.
Why did William Marks say that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy and he wasn't a Brighamite?
Yeah, I would love to hear that quote. Hit me with that one. And put the year
Marks
inside
in
of
a
there.
letter to a friend in 1865 said, Joseph came to me about
1865, remind me how many years after Joseph's death this is. In other words, is it the new order of things happening?
Do you deny all records that are later than 1844?
No, but what I would expect to see is I would expect to see a consistency. If people are to be taken seriously decades after Joseph's death, can you show anything that would corroborate it from Joseph Smith's life? 0 children, 0 records of any sealings, 0 teachings on polygamy other than to condemn it, and never once use the term that you're trying to deceptively promote of celestial plural marriage. That's just dishonest, Jacob Hansen.
So, Jacob Isbell, if I said that you were married to your wife and that you were also married to Michelle Stone, would you deny it?
Well, if you said it, like if you made that claim?
Yeah, would you?
No, I'd let you run with that one.
So you would...
I'd let you spread that one
good.
far and wide.
Okay,
I met Shane for the first time tonight, and I'd have to fight him for it. He's definitely got the reach on me. But no, go wild with that one.
Would you... So if someone claims that someone is married, Michelle says that she would deny that she was married to you.
Come on.
I
showered.
Why didn't Fanny Alger ever deny that she was a plural wife of Joseph Smith?
Here's the note that I wrote down on Fanny Alger specifically that I forgot to ask you. Why didn't she verify it? In other
she
words,
just said it was, it's just my own business.
She didn't deny it. She also didn't deny that she's a time traveler. In other words, trying to prove a negative. If you're claiming that he was, well, do you think that she was married to
If I
Joseph?
was married, no, you can't, well, it's not time to ask questions.
Yeah. But that's a good one. I'll give you some of my time. Do you think that they were married?
Here we go. Why didn't Agnes Smith deny that she was sealed to Joseph after she left the church?
I don't even know who Agnes Smith is. But I'll say this in general. Like when I've looked up when these sealings happened, the supposed wives of Joseph Smith are on the church records being sealed years after Joseph's death. What's up with that?
Okay, why should we
In other words, why isn't there records during his life?
Why should we believe you over the testimony of Leonard Sobey, Ebenezer Robinson, Sidney Rigdon, Agnes Smith, and many other non-Brighamites who all said that Joseph practiced polygamy?
It's a really good list. It would take me a while to simply say this. What I usually do when somebody like gives a shotgun list of things, I usually say, great, can I write it down? I have appreciated the times when somebody's given a spreadsheet and what usually sticks out. I wonder if it's the same thing here. We see 30 years after Joseph's death, 40 years after Joseph's death, and we can find it directly contradicted by Joseph Smith himself. So, in other words, not having the files upload into my mind just automatically, I know that's what I'd be looking for.
Let's go through the spreadsheet here. Jane Law said that the revelation read in the High Council meeting said it authorized some men to have the number of 10 wives. And Section 132 talks about 10 virgins.
Was that one of the what's it called, in the Nauvoo Expositor, one of the affidavits?
Yes. Next, Austin Cowles says that David and Solomon had many wives. That also is in there. Austin Cowles said that they sin not. He literally is quoting it. Says they sin not in the matter of Uriah. So, and Doctrine and Covenants says that. Okay, hold on. Let me go through these.
I'm reading it. But do you consider these? Do
you see the correlations
do you consider
here? Do you
them?
Just ignore those?
Well, let me ask this. I am aware that there's pretty significant conflict of interest with the Laws and the Cowles. Are you aware of anything that would at least tell you that there's a conflict of interest?
I'm not on the witness stand right now.
Because William, let me point this out. In other words,
do you see a correlation here on the screen between what they said and what was in Section 132?
So the top one, Jane Law, the bottom one, Jane Law, We know that William Law was trying. Well, in other words,
I'm asking you if you even see a correlation. It's just a yes or no.
Yeah. In other words,
is there a correlation here?
What Brigham Young presented in 1852 that has now become Section 132. I see some of the same language. Now, William Law was trying to start his own church, running on the credibility.
So you do see a correlation.
I do. In other words,
so why is this? Hold on.
Let me just put this in.
Why is there a correlation?
Along with that correlation, I see pretty significant conflict of interest in Jane Law's testimony.
Okay, but you do see a correlation. Why does the correlation exist? How do you explain it?
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that what seems to make the most sense with the least amount of assumptions, what was published in the Nauvoo Expositor, Brigham Young used part of it.
So Brigham Young used the anti-Mormon, anti-polygamous Nauvoo Expositor to create Section 132. That's where you're going?
It may have some of it. Now, here's what I'll point out. There's hours and hours.
Okay, I have more. I just went to the next slide. Do you see a correlation between these things that I've listed here and all of these things in Section 132?
And now I pointed out to you.
Watching this, eventually you can pause it and go through them individually.
So far, between the last slide and this slide, it's about 80% or more last name Law. William Law published his intention in the Nauvoo Expositor I want to be the, what does he call it? Hold on, let me give you an answer. The reason that I don't trust Jane Law and William Law.
But you're not answering the question I'm asking.
You're interrupting this, and I'm going to do the microphone thing.
Why does the correlation exist?
Yeah, with the laws, here's why I don't trust them. William Law published his intention to start his own church based upon the credibility of Joseph Smith. He's a fallen prophet. I'm your new prophet. Okay. People have already ordained me.
Pause
so
for a second.
William Law.
Okay, hold on. Pause time.
Just answer. Can you answer that one? Because the time's coming up.
Yeah, in other words, what you're pointing out from Section 132, what Brigham Young shared in 1852, it looks like the same thing.
Last questions. Did Joseph Smith's death have to do with polygamy?
Probably. Yeah.
Who killed Joseph Smith?
I don't know. I wasn't in the room, but probably the reason why I think.
Do you think that John Taylor killed Joseph Smith or Hiram Smith?
I definitely consider it, and here's the reason why. The Hiram Smith himself. Well, let me just give 2 points. Let me give you the 2 points why I believe something other than the official record is what happened. All injuries on the bodies of John Taylor, Joseph Smith, and Hiram Smith were caused by pistols, not muskets, directly contradicting the testimony. Hiram himself, the entry wound is under his neck. The exit wound is from his nose. Okay. And we all recognize. Hold on. We all recognize that is a hostage situation under the neck.
All right,
through the nose. Okay. So I definitely consider it's different than what's printed there.
So why did the group and the mob publicly claim that they killed him and that he fell out of the window and they all saw him and they published that in the Warsaw Signal and that Joseph died outside the building on the ground in front of them?
Yeah, I wouldn't give a long enough answer. I'll give a plug for especially Who Killed Joseph Smith Part 2. I love the historical record on that one. I'm not going to attempt to
why did Joseph excommunicate John Bennett?
John Bennett. I don't know. I'm about to call him Jim again. No, John Bennett was whoring around. And
yes.
There's even rumors of him performing abortions on Eliza R. Snow.
Okay, so would Joseph have excommunicated Brigham Young and the other polygamists if he knew about it?
I think so.
So you don't think Joseph knew all of this was going on behind Joseph's back and he didn't know about any of it?
I think that's why there was a sense of urgency.
With all of his closest apostles and associates.
If you want this time, I'll just give it to you. But if you want me to answer.
Go ahead.
I think there was a sense of urgency to get rid of Joseph because he was acting upon excommunicating the polygamists.
Okay, so the polygamists, all the closest associates of Joseph, killed him because they were all practicing polygamy and he was going to stop them.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yes, that's your answer?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Specifically.
You're going to go with that? Okay. Can anyone ever be justified in telling a lie to protect someone's life?
I mean, I can certainly understand why somebody would have a moral quandary.
If you're hiding Jews in your house and a Nazi came and knocked on your door and said, "Are you hiding any Jews?" Would you be justified in lying to them?
I believe in the Second Amendment. I'd shoot him in the freaking face.
Okay, cool. Were the saints' lives at risk due to mobs in the 1840s?
Yes, especially from the people that you're publishing from the Nauvoo Expositor. These that you have published here publish their intentions to raise a mob to get Joseph killed.
Okay, cool.
So do you enjoy the content here on Thoughtful Faith? If so, be sure to hit the notification bell. This ensures that our new videos show up on your feed. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook group called Thoughtful Saints, where myself and others discuss the sorts of topics found on this channel. And lastly, if you think other people would benefit from this video, please be sure to share it.